Hello all, welcome back. We left off with a discussion of Boolean values and comparisons and true or false Boolean logic. So we're going to start out talking about a few ways to use this. So we're going to talk about conditionals. So I'll make a new file, conditionals practice, with a main method. So what is a conditional? Well, a conditional is something of the sort if then. But the then part is really slightly different than you might expect. It's sort of implied by having an if statement. And what that sort of looks like is this. If some condition is true, execute these instructions. So we'll execute instructions inside of the block, inside of these braces, given that our condition is true. And what is a condition? Well, a condition ends up being some Boolean logic thing, statement. It could just be simply true or false, or it could be something more complex, like 3 is less than 5, 8 is greater than 17. These all have truth values, as we discovered last video. So I'm going to start out with something a little more complicated than that. So let's say I have an int x equals 5, int y equals 3, and I can compare these two using a statement. But if these are, let's say, let's say I have an if statement where I put just a simple comparison here. If x is equal to y. Let's try doing something. What should I do? I should system.out.print. Maybe x is equal to y. Okay, and this is our if part. This is the then part. If this is true, then I'll do this stuff. So let's try this out. Let's see what I can do with this when I run it. Well, right now, nothing happens. Why? Well, x is not equal to y. So let's change it to 5 and 5. If 5 is equal to 5, then x is equal to y. Pretty straightforward. I can do a less than and run this. And I see that x is equal to y. Well, in this case, we're looking at less than or equal to. Maybe I'll change this to 3. And I'll change my text to x is less than or equal to y. And that is definitely the case. Now, I can also extend this. I could add another if statement, or I could connect one to my if. Well, one thing that I should go into first is the fact that we can say the word else. And else is sort of a catch-all statement that means otherwise do this stuff. So otherwise, meaning if my condition is not true, I'll do the stuff inside the else. So maybe I'll print x is greater than y. Because it must be, in this case, if it's not less than or equal to y, it's got to be greater than y. And we do use this as a catch-all. We don't even need to have another condition because this is the only other thing that could happen. So let's change this so that we hit our else statement. Maybe I'll put 6 there. I'll run, and x is definitely greater than y. Maybe I can change this to 4 again, and you'll notice that only what happens is this. and then as soon as that executes, I jump out of the entire statement. Now, let's change it so that maybe I want to see something special when x is less than y. Maybe I want to see something else if x is equal to y. So I'll change this to x is less than y. And here maybe I can say x is equal to y. And in this case, we're going to run through the following system. First, my if is going to happen, and I'll check to see if it's true. It happens to be, so the first statement prints out, and then I jump to the bottom, line 27 here. I ignore the rest of this. Another thing I can look at is, well, what if they're equal? Does my equal statement work? And we see that it does. X is equal to y. It skips this because this is false. It checks it to see if it's false. If it's false, it jumps to the next statement. Else if x is equal to y, well, that's true. So it prints this, then jumps to line 27. If I change it further so that x is greater than y, I'll run this, and we'll see that we get the correct statement. Jumps in here, sees that this is true, or false rather, jumps in here, sees that this is false, and it can't do anything otherwise, so it jumps into the final statement, else, and it prints that out. So it ignores the stuff inside if the condition is false. And that's sort of your introduction to control structures. You can have if alone, you can have else if and if together, you can have else and if together, and you can have an if, else if, else. You could have as many else ifs as you want. 3 is equal to 5. Well, this will never execute. Or 3 is equal to x, let's say, if x is equal to 3. And then that'll print. And I could have as many of these as I want. I could have 50 of these. I can put if statements inside of if statements. X is equal to 7. Maybe I'll do something else inside. So I can just say x is 7. So let's put this into 7, and maybe I'll change this to 15 so this runs. And you'll notice that I get both of these statements. I have a nested if statement. I can do an else if. Maybe I'll do an else if x is equal to 3. And I can further change that, and I'll see that it works just the same way. The 7 is ignored, the 3 is printed. And then I can have an else again. But this can chain forever and ever and ever. So the trouble then is making sure your brackets are matched, making sure you always have an if you use an else, or an if beforehand if you use an else if. You can't have an else if on its own or an else on its own. It has to be directly after an if or an else if. Okay. That's it for this video. I'll check you on the flip side.